The town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the mid-1960s, was a quiet, unassuming community nestled at the confluence of the Kanawha and Ohio rivers. It was a place where life moved at a predictable, gentle pace, defined by the rhythms of the seasons and the steady flow of the water. The most significant local landmark was the Silver Bridge, a gleaming structure of steel and I-beams that connected the town to Ohio, a vital artery for commerce and daily life. But in the autumn of 1966, a shadow fell over this idyllic setting, a presence that would forever sear the name of Point Pleasant into the annals of the paranormal and transform it from a sleepy river town into the epicenter of one of America's most enduring and terrifying legends. The first documented glimpse of this terror occurred on a cold, clear night, the 15th of November, 1966. Two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, were out for a leisurely drive. Seeking a moment of privacy, they drove toward the TNT area, a secluded wooded zone on the outskirts of town. This was the site of a former World War II munitions plant, a place of abandoned igloo-shaped bunkers that stored high explosives during the war, and now stood as eerie, concrete sentinels in the darkness. It was a popular local spot for teenagers, but on this night, it would become the stage for a nightmare. As their car's headlights swept across the gravel road near the old factory gate, they illuminated a figure standing beside a generator. What they saw defied logic and sent a jolt of primal fear through them. It was a man-like shape, but impossibly tall, standing at least 7 feet high. Its body was shrouded in what appeared to be dark gray fabric or perhaps fur. But its most horrifying features were its wings, massive folded appendages behind its back, and its eyes. Two luminous red orbs glowed with an unearthly light from where a head should have been. The creature seemed to be watching them, its gaze paralyzing. Terrified, Roger Scarberry slammed the car into reverse, spun the vehicle around, and sped back toward Route 62. As they raced down the highway, Linda Scarberry, looking out the back window, let out a scream. The creature was following them. It was not running, it was flying, keeping pace with their car, which was now speeding at over 100 miles per hour. They described its flight as effortless, with powerful rhythmic wing beats that carried it through the air without any visible effort. It pursued them, a silent, dark shape against the night sky, all the way to the city limits of Point Pleasant, before vanishing as mysteriously as it had appeared. Shaken to their core, the two couples drove directly to the Mason County Sheriff's Office. Their story was so bizarre, their fear so genuine, that the deputy on duty, Millard Halstead, had no choice but to take them seriously. He later told reporters, "They were genuinely frightened. I've known these kids all their lives. They wouldn't make something like this." The local newspaper, the Point Pleasant Register, ran the story on the 16th of November under a headline that captured the sheer bewilderment of the event. "Couple see man-sized bird, creature, something." The legend of the Mothman was born, and the quiet life of Point Pleasant was about to be shattered forever. The first terrifying encounter was over, but it was only the beginning. The story of a winged monster with glowing red eyes, published in the local paper, was a spark that would ignite a firestorm of fear, curiosity, and mass hysteria. The shadow that had fallen over Point Pleasant was about to spread, touching dozens of lives and leading to a tragedy that would shake the community to its very foundations. To follow the trail of the Mothman as it plunges a town into chaos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a moment of the chilling revelation. The publication of the Scarberry and Mollett story in the Point Pleasant Register acted like a starting pistol. It was as if the entire town, having been given permission to speak of the unbelievable, suddenly found its voice. In the days and weeks that followed the 15th of November 1966, the Mason County Sheriff's Office and the local newspapers were flooded with dozens of similar reports,
The single shocking sighting had blossomed into a full-blown epidemic of terror, and the Mothman was seemingly everywhere. Just 3 days before the infamous TNT area incident, on the 12th of November, a separate event had already set an eerie precedent. 5 men digging a grave in a cemetery near the small town of Clendenin, West Virginia, reported seeing a large, man-like figure soar through the sky above them, its dark form silhouetted against the twilight. At the time, it was dismissed as a strange, isolated story, but in the context of the Point Pleasant sightings, it became retroactively known as the first recorded encounter with the creature. Now the wave of reports intensified. 2 volunteer firemen encountered the being and described it in simpler, yet no less frightening terms: a large bird with red eyes. A contractor named Newell Partridge came forward with a story from the same night as the Scarberry sighting. He reported that his television began emitting a strange, high-pitched buzzing sound, and his German Shepherd, Bandit, began howling uncontrollably at something outside. Partridge grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. Shining the beam into the darkness of his field, he saw 2 red circles of light glowing like bicycle reflectors. The moment the light hit them, the creature let out a shrill screech, and Bandit charged toward it, barking ferociously. The dog vanished into the night and was never seen again. The descriptions from the witnesses were remarkably consistent, creating a composite sketch of a true cryptid. The Mothman was universally described as being between 7 and 10 feet tall, with a wingspan that some estimated to be as wide as 10 feet. Its body was often described as muscular and man-like, but covered in dark grayish fur or feathers. Its most defining and terrifying feature remained its eyes, large, red, and luminous, set into a head that often seemed to lack other distinct features, like a mouth or nose. Witnesses reported that looking directly into these eyes induced a feeling of overwhelming dread and a strange hypnotic paralysis. The creature's abilities were as frightening as its appearance. It was not merely a glider. It was a powerful flyer, capable of taking off vertically and achieving incredible speeds, easily keeping pace with automobiles traveling at over 100 miles per hour. It was often completely silent, but when it did make a sound, it was a high-pitched, piercing shriek or a series of mechanical-sounding clicks. It seemed to possess an uncanny intelligence, often appearing to observe human activity from a distance, and a disturbing tendency to be seen near the homes of those who had reported it, as if it was watching them. The authorities were at a loss. Sheriff George Johnson, a pragmatic man, did his best to provide rational explanations. He publicly speculated that the townspeople were seeing an unusually large bird, perhaps a sandhill crane or a great blue heron that had strayed from its migration path. A biologist from West Virginia University supported this theory, noting that the sandhill crane has reddish skin around its eyes and can stand nearly 5 feet tall. But these explanations rang hollow to those who had seen the creature up close. They knew what they had seen was no bird. It was something else entirely. Something that defied all known categories of animal life. The stage was set for a collision between small-town America and a phenomenon from the farthest edges of reality. The town was paralyzed with fear, but the authorities had no answers. As the sightings multiplied, a new theory began to emerge, one that connected the Mothman to the area's dark and secretive past. What was the true connection between the creature and the abandoned TNT plant? The mystery was about to deepen, drawing the attention of investigators who would propel the legend onto the national stage. To uncover the secret history of the TNT area and the men who sought to explain the Mothman, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for the next chapter.
As the Mothman sightings continued through the winter of 1966 and into 1967, the story inevitably attracted the attention of figures from outside Point Pleasant. These were men who specialized in the unexplained, and their involvement would transform a local monster story into a complex tapestry of paranormal phenomena, government conspiracy, and apocalyptic prophecy. The 2 most influential of these investigators were John Keel, a New York-based journalist and ufologist, and Alexander Gray Barker, a writer and publisher known for his work on flying saucers.
John Keel, who would later author the definitive book on the subject, The Mothman Prophecies, arrived in Point Pleasant and immersed himself in the case. He interviewed hundreds of witnesses and began to document a pattern that was far stranger than anyone had anticipated. The Mothman, he concluded, was not an isolated phenomenon. Its appearances were inextricably linked to a whole host of other bizarre occurrences. Keel's notebooks filled with reports of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, seen in the skies over West Virginia and Ohio. He documented encounters with mysterious, menacing figures who would become known as the Men in Black. Pale, awkward individuals in dark suits who would visit witnesses, warning them to stop talking about what they had seen. Keel began to develop a radical theory. He proposed that the Mothman was not a physical creature in the conventional sense, but an ultra-terrestrial, a being from a different dimension or reality that could interact with our own. He saw it as a form of psychic phenomenon, a manifestation of a consciousness that fed on human fear and could manipulate events and perceptions. The Mothman, the UFOs, and the Men in Black were all part of the same complex, intelligent force, one that was both playful and deeply sinister. Most chillingly, Keel became convinced that this force was issuing warnings of an impending, catastrophic event. This theory found a grim anchor in the geography of the sightings. The TNT area, the epicenter of the Mothman appearances, was not just any abandoned lot. It was a former top-secret government facility where munitions were manufactured and stored during World War II. The land was rumored to be contaminated, and conspiracy theories flourished. Was the Mothman a mutated creature created by chemical waste? Was it a psychic projection from a secret military experiment gone horribly wrong? Or was the area a thin place, a portal that allowed these ultra-terrestrial entities to cross into our world? The abandoned domed bunkers provided the perfect ominous backdrop for such speculations. Then, on the 15th of December, 1967, the prophecies that Keel had been documenting reached their horrifying climax. It was the height of the Christmas shopping season, and the Silver Bridge, connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, was clogged with evening rush-hour traffic. Without warning, at 10 minutes past 5, the bridge uttered a loud groan and its entire structure began to tremble. In a matter of seconds, the I-beam suspension system failed and the Silver Bridge collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River. Dozens of cars plunged into the darkness. The frantic rescue efforts that followed could not prevent a staggering loss of life. 46 people perished in the disaster. In the stunned and grieving aftermath, a haunting connection was immediately made. The Mothman sightings had ceased as abruptly as they had begun. The last reported sighting was on the very day the bridge fell. Witnesses came forward claiming they had seen the creature perched on the steel framework of the bridge in the days and hours before the collapse. John Keel's theory now seemed terrifyingly prescient. The Mothman had not been a monster in the traditional sense. It had been a harbinger of doom, a spectral sentinel whose appearance was a warning of the tragedy to come. The creature was forever linked to the disaster, transforming from a local terror into a national symbol of impending catastrophe. The bridge had fallen, and the Mothman had vanished, but the legend was now immortal. The tragedy provided a dark and definitive conclusion to the 13 months of terror, yet it also opened up new, unanswerable questions. Was the creature a cause of the disaster or merely a witness? The search for answers would continue for decades as scientists and skeptics fought to reclaim the narrative from the paranormal investigators. To explore the great debate over the true nature of the Mothman, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for the next chapter.
In the cold light of day that followed the Silver Bridge tragedy,
The terrifying reality of the Mothman began to be scrutinized by minds less inclined to believe in ultra-terrestrials and interdimensional portals. The task of explaining away the 100-plus sightings fell to folklorists, psychologists, and professional skeptics, who offered a series of rational, if less sensational, explanations for the phenomenon that had gripped Point Pleasant. The most prominent scientific theory pointed to a case of misidentification. As Sheriff Johnson and the state biologist had suggested, the primary culprit was likely the sandhill crane. This is a massive bird, standing up to 5 feet tall with a wingspan that can exceed 7 feet. Crucially, it has a distinctive patch of red skin on its forehead, which in the poor light of a car's headlights or a flashlight beam could easily be perceived as glowing red eyes. Having strayed from its normal migration route, a disoriented sandhill crane would have been a startling and unfamiliar sight to the residents of West Virginia. Other birds, such as the great blue heron or even a large barred owl, were also put forward as candidates. The barred owl, in particular, has a large rounded head and reflects light with a red eye shine, which could account for the creature's famous glowing orbs. The skeptical investigator Joe Nickell took this a step further. He argued that the initial wave of press attention created a classic feedback loop of mass hysteria. Once the story was published, people were primed to see the Mothman. Normal, everyday sights, a bird in flight, a shadow in the woods, were reinterpreted through the lens of the new legend. Nickell also uncovered evidence of outright hoaxes, such as a group of construction workers who admitted to tying flashlights to helium balloons to spook the town. He suggested that the creature's ability to fly at high speeds was a classic exaggeration, a common feature of urban legends, where details become more dramatic with each retelling. From a psychological perspective, folklorist Jan Harold Brunvand analyzed the Mothman reports and found striking parallels to older folk tales from around the world. The archetype of a winged humanoid omen of death is a recurring figure in global mythology. Brunvand suggested that a real triggering event, such as the sighting of an unusual bird, acted as a catalyst around which pre-existing cultural fears and story templates could crystallize. The Mothman was a modern manifestation of an ancient archetype, its form updated to fit the industrial landscape of a 20th century American town. The most compelling psychological explanation is that of mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria where physical symptoms of anxiety spread through a community. The people of Point Pleasant were under a form of collective, low-grade stress generated by the initial frightening reports. This anxiety manifested as visual and auditory hallucinations, with individuals genuinely believing they saw and heard the creature. The human brain is adept at pattern recognition, and in the dark, it can easily assemble random shapes and sounds into the monster it fears most. This theory explains why the descriptions were so uniform. The community had collectively agreed on what the monster looked like. The connection to the Silver Bridge collapse, while powerful, is likely a tragic coincidence that was given meaning after the fact, a cognitive bias known as postdiction. There is no evidence the Mothman caused the bridge's failure. The official investigation determined the collapse was due to a single corroded eye bar in the suspension chain that had gone undetected during inspections. However, in the grieving human mind, the need to find pattern and meaning in random tragedy is overpowering. The mysterious creature, already a symbol of fear, was naturally cast in the role of a prophet of doom. Its disappearance after the disaster sealed this connection in the public consciousness, creating a perfect, haunting narrative from two unrelated events. The debate between believers and skeptics would ensure that the Mothman, whether flesh and blood creature or collective phantom, would never truly die. The scientists and skeptics had presented their cases, but the human heart is not always swayed by rational argument. The legend of the Mothman had taken root, and it was destined to grow far beyond the borders of Point Pleasant, evolving from a local nightmare into a global icon and a surprising engine for economic survival. The story was not over. It was simply changing form. To witness the rebirth of the Mothman as a cultural phenomenon and a town's unlikely savior, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for the next chapter.
The years following the Silver Bridge collapse and the disappearance of the Mothman should have been a time for the legend to fade into obscurity. Instead, the opposite occurred. The 13-month period of terror, capped by a profound tragedy, had all the elements of a timeless story. Through books, film, and the sheer force of human fascination, the Mothman was resurrected, transforming from a feared omen into a cultural icon, and, most surprisingly, the economic lifeline for the town it once haunted. The first major step in this transformation was the work of the investigators who had been on the ground. Gray Barker published his account of the events, bringing the story to a dedicated audience of paranormal enthusiasts. But it was John Keel's 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, that truly launched the legend into the stratosphere. Keel's narrative was not a simple catalog of sightings. It was a sprawling, philosophical, and deeply unsettling work that wove together the Mothman, UFOs, Men in Black, and precognitive visions into a single, terrifying tapestry. He presented Point Pleasant as a focal point for cosmic, often malevolent forces, and his theory of the ultra-terrestrial provided a sophisticated, if unproven, framework for understanding the phenomena. The book became a classic of paranormal literature, ensuring that the story would be discovered by new generations of readers. The legend's next great leap came in 2002 with the release of a major motion picture, The Mothman Prophecies, starring Hollywood A-lister Richard Gere. Directed by Mark Pellington, the film was a loose adaptation of Keel's book, focusing on a Washington Post journalist drawn to Point Pleasant after his wife has a mysterious premonition. The film took creative liberties, but its atmospheric, psychological horror and high-profile cast introduced the Mothman to millions of people around the world who had never heard of the West Virginia town. It presented the creature not as a physical monster to be fought, but as an inscrutable psychic entity linked to tragedy, cementing its modern image as a harbinger of doom. This national and international exposure presented an unexpected opportunity for Point Pleasant. The town, still carrying the memory of the bridge disaster, made a momentous decision to embrace the legend. In 2002, the same year the film was released, the town held its first Mothman Festival. What began as a small gathering has since grown into an annual weekend event that attracts thousands of visitors from across the globe. The main street fills with vendors, guest speakers, and enthusiasts. The festival features events like pancake eating contests, guided hayride tours of the infamous TNT area, and lectures by paranormal researchers. The commitment to the legend became permanent with the unveiling of a magnificent 12-foot-tall stainless steel statue of the Mothman in the town center in 2003. Created by artist Bob Roach, the statue depicts the creature with its wings outstretched and its iconic red eyes, a bold and unapologetic monument to the town's strange history. Soon after, the Mothman Museum and Research Center opened its doors, becoming a repository for newspaper clippings, eyewitness accounts, and memorabilia related to the sightings and the bridge collapse. It serves as a pilgrimage site for believers and the curious alike. This entrepreneurial spirit has allowed Point Pleasant to reclaim its narrative. The Mothman, once a source of fear and sorrow, has been transformed into a symbol of community resilience and identity. The creature that was once blamed for a tragedy has become the reason the town thrives. The legend has also permeated wider popular culture, appearing in video games like Fallout 76, the Castlevania series, and the card game Magic: The Gathering, ensuring its place in the modern mythological landscape. The story of the Mothman is no longer just a story about a monster. It is a story about how a community can confront its darkest chapters and, through creativity and courage, turn a curse into a blessing. The Mothman had been embraced, commercialized, and immortalized. But for the true believers, the researchers, and the witnesses, the mystery was never truly solved. The final chapter of the story asks the most profound question. What is the enduring power of this legend? And why does it continue to captivate us more than half a century later?
The years following the Silver Bridge collapse and the disappearance of the Mothman should have been a time for the legend to fade into obscurity. Instead, the opposite occurred. The 13-month period of terror, capped by a profound tragedy, had all the elements of a timeless story. Through books, film, and the sheer force of human fascination, the Mothman was resurrected, transforming from a feared omen into a cultural icon, and, most surprisingly, the economic lifeline for the town it once haunted. The first major step in this transformation was the work of the investigators who had been on the ground. Gray Barker published his account of the events, bringing the story to a dedicated audience of paranormal enthusiasts. But it was John Keel's 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, that truly launched the legend into the stratosphere. Keel's narrative was not a simple catalog of sightings. It was a sprawling, philosophical, and deeply unsettling work that wove together the Mothman, UFOs, Men in Black, and precognitive visions into a single terrifying tapestry. He presented Point Pleasant as a focal point for cosmic, often malevolent forces, and his theory of the ultra-terrestrial provided a sophisticated, if unproven framework for understanding the phenomena. The book became a classic of paranormal literature, ensuring that the story would be discovered by new generations of readers. The legend's next great leap came in 2002 with the release of a major motion picture, The Mothman Prophecies, starring Hollywood A-lister Richard Gere. Directed by Mark Pellington, the film was a loose adaptation of Keel's book, focusing on a Washington Post journalist drawn to Point Pleasant after his wife has a mysterious premonition. The film took creative liberties, but its atmospheric, psychological horror and high-profile cast introduced the Mothman to millions of people around the world who had never heard of the West Virginia town. It presented the creature not as a physical monster to be fought, but as an inscrutable psychic entity linked to tragedy, cementing its modern image as a harbinger of doom. This national and international exposure presented an unexpected opportunity for Point Pleasant. The town, still carrying the memory of the bridge disaster, made a momentous decision to embrace the legend. In 2002, the same year the film was released, the town held its first Mothman Festival. What began as a small gathering has since grown into an annual weekend event that attracts thousands of visitors from across the globe. The main street fills with vendors, guest speakers, and enthusiasts. The festival features events like pancake eating contests, guided hayride tours of the infamous TNT area, and lectures by paranormal researchers. The commitment to the legend became permanent with the unveiling of a magnificent 12-foot-tall stainless steel statue of the Mothman in the town center in 2003. Created by artist Bob Roach, the statue depicts the creature with its wings outstretched and its iconic red eyes, a bold and unapologetic monument to the town's strange history. Soon after, the Mothman Research Center opened its doors, becoming a repository for newspaper clippings, eyewitness accounts, and memorabilia related to the sightings and the bridge collapse. It serves as a pilgrimage site for believers and the curious alike.
This entrepreneurial spirit has allowed Point Pleasant to reclaim its narrative. The Mothman, once a source of fear and sorrow, has been transformed into a symbol of community resilience and identity. The creature that was once blamed for a tragedy has become the reason the town thrives. The legend has also permeated wider popular culture, appearing in video games like Fallout 76, the Castlevania series, and the card game Magic the Gathering, ensuring its place in the modern mythological landscape. The story of the Mothman is no longer just a story about a monster. It is a story about how a community can confront its darkest chapters and, through creativity and courage, turn a curse into a blessing. The Mothman had been embraced, commercialized, and immortalized,
But for the true believers, the researchers, and the witnesses, the mystery was never truly solved. The final chapter of the story asks the most profound question: what is the enduring power of this legend, and why does it continue to captivate us more than half a century later? To delve into the lasting legacy and the unanswered questions that still linger over Point Pleasant, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for the final installment.
More than 50 years have passed since the last official sighting of the Mothman, yet its legend burns brighter than ever. It has transcended its origins as a regional monster story to become a permanent fixture in American folklore, a subject of ongoing debate, and a powerful symbol that speaks to something deep within the human psyche. The enduring power of the Mothman lies not in the possibility of its physical reality, but in its perfect embodiment of our deepest fears and our eternal search for meaning in a chaotic world. At its core, the Mothman is a modern archetype of the unknown. It represents the terrifying possibility that our understanding of the natural world is incomplete, that there are still things lurking in the shadows that science cannot classify or explain. In an age of satellites and smartphones, the idea that a giant winged humanoid could terrorize a community for over a year is both thrilling and deeply unsettling. It challenges our confidence and reminds us that mystery still exists. The creature's preferred habitat, the abandoned industrial TNT area, further cements its status as a monster for the modern era, a being born from the ruins of human ambition and the secrets of a military past. Furthermore, the Mothman legend is a powerful narrative about the fear of impending doom. The creature's inextricable link to the Silver Bridge collapse taps into a universal human anxiety, the dread of a sudden, random catastrophe. Life can change in an instant, and the Mothman becomes a tangible representation of that unpredictable threat. It gives a face to the faceless fear of accidents, disasters, and fate. This is why the legend has proven to be so adaptable, with alleged sightings being reported before other tragedies around the world, such as the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The Mothman is a folkloric vessel for our collective anxiety, a way to personify the unpersonifiable concept of tragedy. The story also serves as a fascinating case study in the nature of belief. The hundreds of witnesses in Point Pleasant were, by all accounts, ordinary, credible people who experienced something that they believed to be real. Their consistent testimony forces us to confront a difficult question. What is more real? The objective, scientific explanation that dismisses the phenomenon as misidentified cranes and mass hysteria, or the subjective, lived experience of an entire community? The Mothman is real in its consequences. It altered lives, shaped a town's destiny, and created a legacy that continues to this day. It demonstrates that history is not just made of verifiable facts, but also of stories, beliefs, and the meanings people assign to events. Ultimately, the Mothman has become a modern myth. Like the ancient tales of gods and monsters, it serves to explain the unexplainable. It provides a framework for understanding a period of intense collective trauma, giving a strange kind of meaning to a senseless tragedy. The creature's disappearance after the bridge collapse provides a satisfying, if tragic, narrative closure that is the hallmark of a powerful story.
It is a legend that continues to evolve, finding new life in festivals, museums, video games, and films. The statue in Point Pleasant does not stand as proof of a biological entity, but as a monument to the power of a story. The Mothman Museum is not a laboratory, but a shrine to mystery. The annual festival is not a scientific conference, but a celebration of the strange and unexplained. The Mothman endures because we need it to. In a world that often feels disenchanted, it represents a last vestige of wonder, a reminder that the map of reality still has edges marked, "Here be dragons." It is a testament to the idea that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but to be pondered, feared, and ultimately transformed into a legend that gives a small town on the Ohio River a unique and unforgettable place in the world. The story of the Mothman is a journey into the heart of one of America's greatest modern mysteries. It challenges our perception of reality and reminds us that the most enduring monsters are those we help to create. If you are drawn to the deepest enigmas of the human experience, to the stories that linger at the edge of understanding, then your search for the unexplained continues with us. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We are always exploring the darkest corners of history and the human mind.